First thing, more broadly, I love hearing about how stories evolve along the way. So what is the biggest difference between how you pictured this film turning out when you first came up with the idea and what everyone will see in the finished product?
I don't know. Honestly, sounds lame, but it was kind of the same thing. I mean, there were certainly inventions that happened along the way, but this weird idea kind of came together pretty quickly, and then it was just about, executing. Mainly that was the real challenge, but yeah, for the most part, it kind of is the movie that we set out to make. So yeah, hats off to all the team that made that happen.
Oh, so it goes when you have a clear vision and also a good understanding of all the behind-the-scenes necessities to pull off a concept like this.
But even with everything that I knew, and I knew enough to be dangerous, it was a surprise. This is a really, really difficult movie to make.
I'm going to come back to that. Digging into the story, I was reading in our press notes, you had kind of broken it down into 3 stages, and one particular element caught my eye because of the way it was worded. You had mentioned that the third element of developing this concept was finding an adversarial figure for Noah, and then you specifically said a character who eventually became Proximus Caesar in the script, and that character fascinates me to no end. So what was it like cracking that character? Yeah,
it was early on. The one thing I didn't come up with was a human story. That should be really credited to Josh Friedman. I knew there was a story that needed to be involved with the humans. That's the core of these movies. But this idea of, I used to call him Curious George, a naive ape who is curious about the world around him, was going to rediscover it. That was a big aspect of it. And then pretty quickly, this idea, I kept thinking about Genghis Khan, this character that, would rule with an iron fist, but had an idea about how he could unite things. And I was just fascinated with the first king ape. You know what I mean? As human beings, we moved through our kind of, thing of civilization. So do the apes, I always say we're entering our Bronze Age of the apes world, And so this idea that, this king ape and then the guy who rediscovered electricity, all that stuff, it was cool. And then obviously it became so much more when Josh got his hands on it, and then Kevin stepped in, it just became something else,
You couldn't have found a better actor for that particular, all the roles in this, but like him and Proximus Caesar is so on point.
It's great.
He does.
Awesome.
I'm not sure how much you think about stuff like this when crafting a screenplay, but did you ever develop how Proximus Caesar came to adopt that mentality and that king-like status?
Yeah, we talked about that stuff. I mean, the idea that he was a fan of man. He studied human culture, human history, and uses it and wields it like a power. That was fantastic, I thought. And, and how he sort of echoes maybe other figures in our recent memory or distant memory in terms of human species, he's a fascinating character. And he's probably the most human-like, actually, of all the apes, actually. He knows most about them. He speaks very fluently, even though he has this great voice. You know what I mean?
It's pretty good.
It's awesome. I don't know. He's just a cool character, and I like to say that he's the most right of all of them. Everything he says is correct. He just goes about it in a really brutal way.
Makes it 1,000,000 times more disturbing.
Yeah, totally.
The other another element of the story that I absolutely loved and was curious about how you came up with the idea was specifically having Noah's clan be the eagle clan.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any particular reason why you were drawn to the eagle over, let's say, any other animal?
It was that whole thing where I was fascinated about apes marching through their ultimate arrival at the 68 version, right? And how they get to that place. And thinking about human beings and their species, how we domesticated dogs, man's best friend, all that kind of stuff. That was a big part of our journey towards modernity, you know what I mean? And so I was like, that'd be cool. And then it can't be dogs though. Actually, for a while, I did some more concept art of it. They had hyenas or something, which was cool looking, but it wasn't right. And that's when suddenly the eagle thing popped in my head. And just the image of him with the thing on his arm. That was that first piece of concept art that I released, was the first piece that I made with my friend Andre Wall, he's a concept designer. And just a cool visual, but it felt right, as an idea, domesticating eagles for, mainly for food, but also, as people will see, protection too.
I mean, Hyena Clan can be a spin. I have a feeling you're being asked about sequels and stuff.
Spoilers.
It feels like there's 1,000,000 possibilities based on the world building that, I mean, you don't even start, but you kind of restart in a sense here in a beautiful way.
I said it before, someone misquoted me, I think, but I was thinking Star Wars in that way of visiting these other worlds, other cultures, kind of get swept up in the whole fantasy of it all a little bit, Try to keep it all grounded and realistic, but I thought it was a cool part of this, of where we could go uniquely because we're so far removed from the previous movies, in terms of the time. Yeah, it was cool. It was fun to kind of hopefully immerse people in this fantasy world, But it's kind of haunting too. It's beautiful, it's wonderful looking, but is this haunting memory of what happened, to the world and what we left behind.
How people have distorted Caesar's intentions and meanings is
that was originally
wildly
the cool idea, that because we got this distance, this idea of the Dark Age, and that this has happened before in the previous history of mankind, right? Like, we've discovered things or learned things, and then we've lost them to time, and then it comes back. And how we could play with Caesar's legacy, how it holds, as like it holds throughout the whole movie, this idea of who he was, and there's multiple versions of him. And Noah's got to be the guy, this blank slate that's going to pick up both in a weird way, and by the end of the movie become a different person because of it. You know what I mean?
You could turn this into an anthology. We could see a multitude of different Caesars.
Go figure. Maybe that's the idea.
I mean, I'm speaking what I want into existence. Another thing from the production notes that crossed my my eye here was it was mentioned that this is fast-forwarding hundreds of years to a post-climate change world. So I was wondering, what was it like developing the look of a post-climate change world, especially when humans were essentially removed from the process at a point?
Well, that's the thing about climate change. Like, the planet will be fine. It's human beings that won't be able to exist, But I've been playing in this kind of setting for a long time now. But yeah, like the things like, rising sea levels, which plays a big part of the end of the movie, essentially. Just the way time erodes and nature overgrows, and that sense of like the '68 movie where time had washed away most evidence of the human's existence. We got to kind of just start that process in this one. It was fun. It was cool. Yeah.
Just thinking about how damn good you make wet apes look.
Yeah, people don't fully realize it because we've managed to avoid a lot in the trailers. but yeah, the water work, we got to obviously use a lot of what Way of Water did in this movie, but put it in CG apes, which is a whole new frontier for Weta, I think, and the amount of simulation data far exceeds anything they've done previously. It's wild.
To get a little specific with that, because Way of Water was brought up a lot in our production notes, can you give us a specific example of like a technology or a technique that they used on that film that you were then able to build upon?
All the water stuff, all the water simulation, everything, every bit of water you see in the movie is all CG. Every bit of it. We didn't shoot anything. And yeah, it's pretty stunning stuff. And it's way more complicated this time because it's not like a waves in the sea. It's crashing and interacting, wet fur strands blowing, water flowing through the fur. It's insane. And that stuff it was the last stuff we delivered. It took a year and a couple months.
Not having it on the bridge scene in particular is kind of blowing my mind right now. That
was on a parking lot.
Absolutely wild
That's why I want
to
to release this thing where you want to see what it actually was we shot, to see what Weta does,
Seeing those kinds of VFX reels delights me to no end.
Yeah, it's fun. I think it's going to be fun for people just to see the real artistry that's involved here. There's no button that makes this stuff happen. There's no make ape or make whatever. It's, it's real, incredible storytelling and artistry that's on display here. It's an honor to be involved with such incredible people.
You've always known what you were doing with VFX, doing well, give yourself some credit.
Yeah,
I've been following along since the beginning.
Dangerous.
So with a movie like this, where it's so heavily reliant on performance capture technology, is there any really valuable piece of advice you got going into Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that you appreciated?
So work with Weta.
Wow, it's fair.
That's the truth, is like I got to trust that it was, what Rupert and Matt ultimately, with Dawn and War and Andy did in those previous movies, they proved it. So I got to just trust it can work. It's possible. You know what I mean? So it was really just about making the scenes honest and truthful, and making sure that it felt right, even in its crude form, and trusting that the process of translating was going to work. You know what I mean? So that's really all it is trusting the really talented people around you. And figuring out how to put the money on the screen. Don't waste it. Yeah. Don't build stuff that you don't need to use and that kind of stuff.
For what it's worth, I think I saw every penny on the screen in this film.
And it's cheap. We made it for a really good number.
Are you allowed to share that number?
I don't think I'm allowed to, actually.
Okay. I feel like at a point when the time is right.
Everyone's very happy about, we made it for less than people thought was possible.
Should celebrate that, because many other films should, when the time is right, at least take a cue from that.
Movies have got to figure out how to be made for less.
Yeah.
That way we can make more risky stuff.
So with that in mind, for a filmmaker who thinks that they need to throw lots of money or fancy tech at something in order to make it happen, and they want to make something like your movies, is there anything you would recommend that they do to save?
Visual effects is like a tool like anything else, like the camera or the lights or the microphones that we use. They're just tools to tell a story. So if you keep your eye on the story, and it's not spectacle for spectacle's sake, then it has some honesty. In a weird way, we're not very fancy. There's no like fancy moves, camera moves, and that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, we have some fun here and there, but it's pretty restrained and it's grounded in that way, I guess. So hopefully, people buy it, as something real that we did, and that it means more than like a whole, I guess we have buildings that crumble and stuff, but
As you said that, my brain got like totally flooded by these epic shots.
Look, I always felt like we're not an action movie, and the trailer sells this big action movie. It's not really. It's a small movie on a big canvas, but it's a pretty intimate little story.
No, you're right. It's like one of the coolest balances to hit too. To feel like an epic adventure, but on a small like character first scale.
Small
I guess
story on a big canvas.
Yeah, I appreciated that. I will warn you that this question comes from a place of loving the world building in your movie and desperately wanting more. Do you have any deleted scenes that we'll be able to see down the line?
Yeah, actually. I actually have 3 minutes of finished VFX that got cut. We're still debating whether or not there's appetite to have it like an extended cut or something with that little bit of footage, but there's probably about 30, 40 minutes of deleted scenes that are in the movie. It was too much movie. And some of it was a shame to cut, some of it which would have never worked, but all of it was great to kind of give context to the story and characters, and it's just stuff that fell away as the endless kind of desire to make it as tight as it could possibly be, but a lot of that stuff will be on the DVD and stuff.
I understand that, but I want more of every single ounce of this world. Speaking of which, let's say you got the opportunity to tell another chapter in the story, maybe turn it into a trilogy. Is there any particular thing that you tee up in Kingdom that you would be most eager to explore in a chapter 2?
Yeah, I mean, really it is the key. The movie begins as Noah's story, but it ends as Noah and May's story, really. And there's literally a door that opens at the end of the movie that, hopefully presents many, many possibilities for continued drama, conflict, and hopefully, an optimism, I guess, for the two species coexisting, But, if we're lucky enough and this thing works, we'll make more.
I have a very good feeling. I've got very high hopes. I'm rooting for you.
I don't count my chickens.
Fair enough. I'm a very superstitious individual. I've tried to adopt manifesting more than jinxing, so I keep telling myself that every time I say something like that out loud.
I just look the other way and let that stuff all happen.
Good things coming your way, including one that I can name drop right now, which is Zelda. Is there any particular new technique you have picked up making Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that you think will bolster your work on that particular film?
The truth is, I think you learn something on every movie, and the Maze Runner movies were huge training ground for me, just in terms of execution and just working in the studio system and, dealing with actors. My first time working with actors, all that kind of stuff. So this is only my fourth movie, so, I've learned a ton on this movie in particular. There's nothing specific other than just, putting money on the screen, trying to tell a good story, and create a world that people want to visit. That's, what we'll take forward.
Blows my mind that this is your fourth film, because you just brought up, I'll end with this one, brought up working with actors. What are you looking for when casting the role of Link in terms of, fitting what people know, but also being the right collaborative partner for you as well?
Look, casting for me is, I always work with awesome casting directors. That's the start. But casting is instinct for me. I don't overanalyze it. I almost all the casting I've ever done so far has been, that's them. I almost know immediately, The only ones I didn't was Dylan. I had to kind of work on that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like with Owen, almost in the first 5 seconds, that's him. It's just, so I kind of trust that instinct, and I don't try to overanalyze it. And then just find good people. That because you're working really hard and you're doing it's impossible making a movie. It's really difficult, and you just want to be with people that you want to be around, and it has each other's backs. And I've been lucky in that regard with casting. So
lucky, keep trusting those instincts, totally. Like that whole trilogy. Now this with all of them, my God.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Perry.